Well, folks, you missed me? I'm back. All right. Well, we've had about a week here to think about all the contenders and all the different things that happened Oscar nomination morning. So it's time to get back at it. And now, a week later, kind of looking at everything that's happened here and having time to reflect on everything and think everything over, it's time to go back and see okay, we've got this year at the Oscars. They've announced the nominations pretty late in the game. Screen Actors Guild has already happened. The Producers Guild and the Critics' Choice Awards have already happened. Obviously, the Globes have happened already as well. We're coming up now this weekend, this coming weekend, I should say, on the Directors Guild Award. We've got BAFTAs the week after that, I believe. And WGA, I believe, is the week or 2 weeks after that. It's we've got some major stuff coming up here, of course. We've got the Indie Spirits also coming up. That's the weekend of the Oscars the day before. So we've still got some precursors, some big awards yet to happen. But it feels like this is a year at the Oscars where there's a lot of categories that are already decided. There's a lot of stuff that we've looked at here in the past few months and we said, okay, it's this or this. And now in the past couple of weeks and the past few award shows and so on, we've begun to see a lot of things really materialize and really stabilize, especially in the four acting races. I mean, it's Gary Oldman, it's Frances McDormand, it's Sam Rockwell, and it's Allison Janney. It looks like no problems there. Nobody's really gone astray, except for a few critics' prizes, which, there's never any, there's very few examples, at least, that I can think of, none of which are coming to my mind right now, of anybody who completely 100% runs the board, never loses a single award. It's very difficult to do that. Director looks very solid behind Guillermo del Toro. Adapted screenplay looks very strong for Call Me by Your Name. As we look through here, cinematography is a really, really good bet for Roger Deakins for Blade Runner. Phantom Thread is very likely to win costumes. Editing, there's a question mark here. We did see Baby Driver was up for comedy editing at the Ace Eddie Awards, and it lost to I, Tonya, which is also nominated. But I think Dunkirk Dunkirk won the drama prize for film editing at Ace Eddie. So it looks like film editing likely to go to Dunkirk, but there's still a little mystery there. Makeup, that one's done. That's Darkest Hour. Production design is Shape of Water. Score is Shape of Water. Song is Coco, Remember Me. Animated feature is also probably going to go to Coco for that one. Visual effects is there's still a little debate going on there of whether it's going to be War for the Planet of the Apes or maybe Blade Runner could win there as well. Maybe Star Wars has a shot at that. The sound categories look like they'll probably go to Dunkirk, but it's not a done deal for those yet either. It's again, it could be just a checkmark thing of, oh, they'll give this to Dunkirk. Documentary, there's a chance for upsets here with Icarus and Strong Island and even Abacus, something like that getting in. Maybe it's a sign that they do like it enough. But Faces Places has become the frontrunner now that Jane has been knocked out of that one. Foreign film, it looks like it's going to solidify between Loveless, The Square, and Fantastic Woman, so there's a little bit of a race there. But the short category, surprisingly, for me at least, the past couple of years, the short categories have always been very, very difficult to predict. And especially in the last couple of years, it's like every once in a while there'll be like Piper in the animated short, and that one's an obvious one, and things like that. But there's always chances for upset here in the short categories. But it looks like this year, I don't think there's too much argument going on here, especially in animated short. It looks like that's going to go to Dear Basketball. It's got everything going for it with a big star, big caliber celebrity behind it in Kobe Bryant, which I didn't mention on Oscar morning, but I kind of realized that late. I'm like, oh shit, that's right. Kobe Bryant now has as many Oscar nominations as Greta Gerwig has, or no, sorry, Greta has two. Anyways, but it's like very rare to see the day when, you've got, I don't know, let's throw Sam Rockwell and Kobe Bryant nominees in the same day. I don't know. You can name anybody else. But anyways, you've got like John Williams did the score and music for that. So everything looks like it's solidifying behind that. And then there were a couple, like In a Heartbeat and a couple other shorts that everybody really liked that were not nominated. In the documentary short category, we had a similar thing happen there. And it looks like Edith and Eddie, which was the one that got the big pop the morning of nominations, looks like that's going to solidify there. And live action short, everybody said to call Elementary from the beginning. So really, it's the short categories might actually be the easiest they've been in several years. So that leaves a lot of mystery and a lot of debate to be happened here in two categories especially. Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay. And I have a feeling that these two categories are going to line up. I mean, it's almost unquestionable at this rate that that the adapted screenplay winner, it's absolutely unquestionable that that one is going to win there. But you're in a very rare camp if you think that has the strength right now to win Best Picture. So yeah, so that means, because the whole reason I'm bringing this up is we've seen over the past 5 years, Best Picture takes the screenplay prize, even with something like Spotlight, which had a few acting nominations, had the director nomination, but it didn't take anything else. It just took screenplay and picture the first time that it happened in over 60 years. And we saw last year with Moonlight. That one won for screenplay. It was not up against La La Land, but it won the adapted prize in that one picture. We've seen that with Argo. We've seen it with 12 Years a Slave and Birdman. And especially Birdman is the one I look to. Because that year, it was really a tight race in that category because Boyhood was up there, and Boyhood could have easily won Best Picture. It had won the Globe. It had won Critics' Choice. It had won a few other prizes here and there, but then Birdman went on that tear at the end and ended up winning just about everything else. BAFTA also went for Boyhood too, so that was a complicated year. Also, we had Grand Budapest that year, which won WGA and had won a few other prizes here and there for screenplay. I think Critics' Choice had also picked up screenplay. And then Birdman had won the Globe for screenplay, and it was, at one point the Best Picture front runner. It kind of became that after, especially for me, after the DGA win. But yeah, it's looking like even in a complicated year like that, whoever wins Best Picture is going to pick up screenplay. And we've seen this year that Get Out has won the Critics' Choice, Lady Bird has won several Critics' Prizes, Phantom Thread also did too, but that's not nominated, and Three Billboards, which won the Globe for screenplay as well. So all three of those movies are in the hunt, but you've also got Shape of Water nominated in that category, which many people right now are picking for Best Picture, very reasonably so. But that's the thing, see. One of those four is going to win screenplay, and I think one of those four is going to win picture as well. And obviously if one was in the adapted category for whatever reason, that would help us spectacularly, but it's not, just not the case this year. Turns out that 8 of the 9 Best Picture nominees are in the original screenplay category or were up for it, if they're not nominated. And we only had one, Call Me By Your Name, and adapted. So that, usually that's a good help to us, but not this time, no. So that adds to the confusion a little bit. So, yeah, let's talk about this. I've made up a little list here of pros and cons for both, because I think it does come down to Shape of Water and Three Billboards. The reason I'm not betting on Get Out, and the reason I'm not betting on Lady Bird right now for Best Picture, is, I've mentioned this before, but these two movies both feel very socially relevant, especially Get Out for the race issue and racism in America, and with Lady Bird with Time's Up and Me Too and all those different movements and stuff, and how it's the female empowerment movie. So these two, you've got these two factors at war with each other because one is trying to outpace the other in importance. One says, oh, this is more important. One says, no, this is more important. And I think these two are siphoning off votes from each other. I think that was the case for PGA. That was the case for the Critics' Choice Award. We did see Lady Bird did win at the Globes against Get Out, but it did have more support there. Whereas when you look at this, except for an additional acting award, these two are on equal footing at the Oscars. They both have director nominations. They both have screenplay. They both have at least one acting nomination as well as Best Picture. So they're, with the exception Laurie Metcalf was also nominated for Lady Bird, these two are at equal footing here. So that doesn't help like it did at the Globes, because that was a pretty substantial miss for Get Out, to miss out for screenplay and to miss out for director, whereas Lady Bird, sure, was a substantial miss for director there for Greta Gerwig, but it was still in for 2 of the acting prizes and screenplay. So that was, significant there. So I think these two, yeah, they siphon each other off. We saw that happen with PGA and Critics' Choice. I think that will continue to happen. WGA doesn't help us because WGA did not nominate 3 Billboards for original screenplay. It wasn't didn't qualify for that award. And Shape of Water is also nominated there, but I just get this feeling Shape of Water is a strong script. It's a very well written script. I just don't see it winning, being a script that wins, especially in a category that's this stacked with so many great scripts this year. It's really hard to see that one winning. But I think WGA especially, if they, and they're probably the last chance here because other than DGA, but of course DGA, it's Del Toro is so far out front there. I don't see an upset happening there. But I think WGA is going to be the last test there. That and then also, I believe they're both up at Critics' Choice as well. Or, sorry, not Critics' Choice. Indie Spirits. I believe they're both up in Indie Spirits, too. Because if WGA, if these two are warring with each other again, that gives the opportunity for something like I, Tonya or Shape of Water or who's the third nominee there? Oh, The Big Sick. One of those three to win WGA. If that happens, then we know for sure that original screenplay Oscar is going to go to 3 Billboards. Because it will have more wins than really any other script this year, because Get Out only has the one win so far. 3 Billboards only has the one win when we get to these final categories, and then we'll see what BAFTA does, but BAFTA, I think, will go for 3 Billboards. It's just both Lady Bird and Get Out were not very heavily favored over there at BAFTA, so I think 3 Billboards wins there. So I think then that would give it the edge over the other 3 competitors. But yeah, so let me keep going here with this thing because I do think it is Shape of Water or 3 Billboards for Best Picture. We're going to start with, we might bounce around a little bit here, but starting with the pros for 3 Billboards, the SAG Ensemble win is significant. And this shows, as I kind of mentioned it back in separate videos there, but we've seen over the years that acting support is absolutely necessary if you're going to win Best Picture. After all, the acting branch in the Academy is the biggest branch by a significant number. I believe the number is, I've read different things. I've read between 3,000 and 4,000 members of the voting branch in the Academy is the actor side. It's probably closer to 3,000, or it might even be 2,800 or 2,900, below 3,000, but it's still a significant number. Of the voters are in the acting branch. Now, obviously, not every single one of those voters in the acting branch is going to vote for 3 Billboards. But if it's, as much as a 75% swing, that's a significant chunk of votes there. And we do see 3 Billboards is nominated for things like film editing and original score. So I don't think it's likely to win those categories, but we'll definitely see some support from some of those people from those branches going for 3 Billboards. The writers branch, I think they like 3 Billboards. Martin McDonagh is, first and foremost known as a writer. So I think that's the reason why he is so heavily favored to win original screenplay in my eyes. I think that's a big part of it. This is a guy kind of like Tarantino who did a film or two before this that got recognition, that got nominated. Well, in the case of Tarantino, he wasn't nominated before Pulp Fiction, but it's like all of a sudden here comes this movie that takes a few award shows by storm, and all of a sudden now it's a big accomplishment in writing. And I think it always was. It's always been my favorite screenplay of the year. But yeah, I can see that kind of being the firebrand kind of thing for the writers branch. And the writers branch, I think, is what helped Spotlight win Best Picture too, because that one. In that category, it was that, or I can't even remember what else was nominated that year, but it wasn't going to go to anything but Spotlight. It was Spotlight all the way. So I think that's something to consider there. Now, one thing that's key here when I'm mentioning this acting support is, as everybody knows, if you're following this, if you're listening to the ground, ear to the ground here, 3 Billboards has its non-fans. And it has people that hate the movie, that go out and criticize the movie, and do so in, especially like the New York Times article that came out, I think it was last week. But one thing that's key here that we're seeing is we've seen actors are the ones who are responding to these criticisms on Twitter and on Facebook and whatever else, what have you. But they're coming back and answering to the criticisms here, and that's huge. That is absolutely huge in that case. And I do think that in particular Neil Patrick Harris was the one I saw that was really going after whoever it was that wrote the New York Times article. Who the name's escaping me, but yeah, and it was kind of a big bloodbath there on Twitter, I guess, for a couple days as they went back and forth over some stuff. But that's huge. And I remember when Three Billboards won the Globe, it was Barbra Streisand who presented the award, and she looked delighted as hell to see Three Billboards in that envelope. So, and that's somebody who's, a pretty liberal firebrand kind of actor, too. So if she is, favoring Three Billboards, just as an example, of course. But if she is, she's got a significant number of followers and people that have her same mindset in the Academy. And several of them are in the acting branch. A few of them could be in the director's branch because she's, of course, known as a director. Of course, a lot of her films, musicals back in the day would win for various, original song or maybe original score or musical score categories. So there's probably some music people in the Academy, too, that kind of have the same views or probably are in the same mindset that she is. That's just one example, of course. There's many other actors, like, I mentioned Neil Patrick Harris. Obviously, you've got, the SAG Ensemble win. And to see that one, Three Billboards, win 3 SAGs, it was up for 4 awards, it won 3 of those 4. That's an overwhelming statement from SAG that they love the movie. And we haven't seen that since The Help, I think, when that one won 3 categories out of its 4 nominations, and that was back in 2011. Now, of course, that didn't go on to win Best Picture, but it was not exactly the odds-on favorite that year, and there were other, obviously The Artist was up there too. And of course, I've mentioned it all year, but The Artist was at least nominated for SAG Ensemble for Outstanding Cast, which Shape of Water, was not. But you've got to remember too, at the Globes, Three Billboards won the Globe for Best Picture Drama, and it beat The Shape of Water, which was the odds-on favorite going into the night. Obviously, there was The Post was also up there, and a lot of people love that one too. But and as we've seen, the Post has almost just completely collapsed the rest of the season after the big showing at the Globes. So yeah, that to me is a big sign that and that was obviously that's just one voting group and they do not overlap with the Academy. So that's an example you can throw that is not going to have a whole bunch of brick and mortar support behind it. But it did beat Shape of Water in that one instance. And of course, as we've seen through the year here, Francis has continually beat Sally Hawkins in that category. Sam Rockwell's continually beat Richard Jenkins in that category. And Octavia Spencer has yet to win any major prizes for that. Instead, it's been Allison Janney, or in some of the critics groups, it's been Laurie Metcalf. So we're not going to see an acting win from Shape of Water. And as we've seen here, especially last year with Moonlight, your Best Picture winner usually has an acting award alongside it. Now, obviously, Birdman did not have any wins there in the acting branch, and it had 3 nominations, same as Shape of Water. And Spotlight had 2 nominations, none of them won. 12 Years a Slave had an acting win go alongside. Argo had 1 nomination that didn't go with it. The Artist had a win. King's Speech had a win. Hurt Locker had a nomination. Obviously, Slumdog was the last one to win Best Picture without an acting nomination, but we've seen No Country for Old Men takes an acting prize with it. Million Dollar Baby takes 2 acting prizes. It's actually going to be, if it lines up with Three Billboards, the same categories as Million Dollar Baby. But then again, Clint Eastwood was nominated for director. He won too, didn't he? I think he did. Yeah, he won too that year. But anyways, it's we've seen that various movies throughout the years here have won picture and at least 1 acting award. In this case, if it is 3 Billboards for picture, it'll take 2. One other thing, and this could be obviously a bit of a controversial statement here, but 3 Billboards feels like a very important movie in some regards, especially when we saw again at the Globe Salma Hayek when she was introducing the movie. She said time's up, and she said how kind of linked it into the movie, saying that Mildred, who's Frances McDormand's character, how her actions in the movie are kind of her saying time's up. I'm tired of waiting for the police to solve this thing. So that's something too that I think helps Moonlight last year over La La Land, was that La La Land didn't feel very important. It felt like, yeah, some people could argue it felt important because it was revitalizing the Hollywood musical, which had been in fashion for 50 plus years, et cetera, et cetera. Arguably 50 years, so probably closer to 40. But anyways, that was, and it felt important there. It felt, important, some people say, because it got Damien Chazelle his first prizes and stuff, which people could say Shape of Water feels important because it gets Guillermo del Toro his first Oscar. So that's that. But it feels like, especially for me, when I was deciding this clear back in the second weekend in November, when I did pick 3 Billboards for Best Picture, I looked at it and I said, well, okay, Shape of Water also has a female lead. The Post has a female lead. Lady Bird has a female lead. So, especially after we saw like Charlie Rose came later, but especially other examples like that and now with Franco and the leader of the one company that was just announced a few days ago, he also got accused of all that stuff too. It's continuing to be a big, big topic in Hollywood and across the globe, actually, too, in the business world, in the financial world, in television world. It's everywhere now, and in the corporate world too. So it's not just isolated to Hollywood anymore. Not to say it always has been, but it felt like the big focus was always on the Hollywood people like Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein initially. But now it's expanding to all the different businesses and different enterprises across the country and the globe. Anyways, so I think as that continues to grow, we're going to want to see the Academy go for a female-led film. And while The Shape of Water, yes, is a female-led film, you got Sally Hawkins in the lead role, her part is that of a mute who doesn't get the chance to speak up against issues like we're seeing, in 3 Billboards. Now, obviously, of course, being a mute character, that's a choice that Del Toro made when he was telling his story. And obviously, what she's speaking up against is this whole idea of attacking the minority, in this case, the sea creature in the film. And that can get linked back in, and obviously that could be a very important story point there. And I'll have more to talk about that when we get to, when I go down the pros of Shape of Water. So, the thing I'm talking about here with feels important with 3 Billboards, obviously, is the main storyline is she's getting revenge on the man or men who defiled her daughter, burned her corpse, and obviously, killed her, and who have not been convicted yet. So, in many ways, and because it is some time after the events, and much in the way that many of these women are stepping forward and speaking about the sexual allegations and sexual misconduct stuff, it's many years later. Now, obviously, months and years is a big difference there, but it's a significant chunk of time after it has happened. So there's one relatable factor, obviously, there. And then also the fact that she is going after solely men who are doing this, solely white men. See where I'm going with this? Yeah. So that, and once you factor that in too, it feels really relevant, really important. Also the fact that it takes place in the heartland, in Missouri. It's, most people think that all this stuff happens just in the big cities and stuff. No, this happens everywhere. It could happen anywhere. So I think that's a very significant point too. And I think you get the vibe of what I'm going for here. And I'm not saying that Shape of Water, Lady Bird, Get Out, Call Me by Your Name, all these other films this year are not important films. I'm just saying that of these films, the ones that feels the most relevant, the most on topic, the most topical, however you want to phrase it, is 3 Billboards. At least that's the way I'm viewing it. That's the most direct ones. Obviously, other than The Post, which is all about freedom of the press and taking down a kind of tyrannical, whatever word you want to use, president. But of course, that's probably not going to win anything Oscar night. So next up, Indie Spirits. The Indie Spirits, as far as I know, Shape of Water was qualifying there. It had a low enough budget and everything. It didn't get any nominations from Indie Spirits, at least not that I've looked up. Maybe it got something or other that I missed, but it wasn't nominated in any of the major categories. So, and 3 Billboards missed out for Best Picture at the Indie Spirits. That's true. It missed out for Director. But it's in for Screenplay, it's in for Supporting Actor, it's in for Lead Actress. So it does have some indie love, whereas Shape of Water has none. Also, when we look ahead to the BAFTAs, Shape of Water and Three Billboards are both up there at BAFTA for film. They're up for director. They're up for screenplay. They're up for the various acting prizes. In the case of Shape of Water, it's actually only Sally Hawkins. They didn't go for it in any of the supporting categories. But both Woody and Sam are nominated at BAFTA in those categories. And sure, Three Billboards had like cinematography, I think, and editing. So it got a little bit of crafts love, but of course all the crafts love at BAFTA was for Shape of Water. So they're both very, some of the more nominated films at BAFTA. But I think that I'm giving the edge to Three Billboards over there, again, because of the relevancy and the fact that going into this race here, when you look at it, Critics' Choice and PGA are, between that and in between SAG and the Globe and Critics' Choice and PGA, the more relevant ones, the more significant ones, the ones that tend to be correct more often are the SAG and the Golden Globe. Whereas Critics' Choice, has been hit and miss the last few years. PGA has been wrong the last 2 years, excuse me. So, that's a thing to consider there for sure. So, I think BAFTA will fall in line for Three Billboards. It is also up for Best British Film, so that shows that it was really well liked over there. As we mentioned, I think it's more likely to win screenplay than Shape of Water. Shape of Water, I think it's a possibility it could win screenplay, but I just don't think so. I can name more situations where Get Out or Lady Bird wins screenplay than I do Shape of Water. Now, of course, when we talk about the cons for Three Billboards, there are three obvious ones. No director nomination. Martin McDonagh did not make it in for director at the Oscars, and as we've mentioned before, Ben Affleck, the last one to do it, to where his movie won picture without director nominations. Of course, in the case of Argo, that was one of the more celebrated films of that year, and a big storm swept up, and all of a sudden, boom, it's like there was this outcry of, how dare you nominate the film but not the director, and that big pushback came in from the voters, and all of a sudden, Argo wins the Golden Globe, which the Globes hadn't happened up to that point. And all of a sudden it wins BAFTA, and it wins PGA, and it wins DGA, and it wins the SAG, and it was unstoppable at that point. Which obviously Three Billboards has lost a couple of those already. And it's also, as we mentioned, very divisive movie. There are some people who put it number one on their list. And remember, this is when we're talking about list, we're talking voters on the preferential ballot where they rank 1 through 9, these 9 Best Picture nominees. So there are some people that are going to put Shape of Water number 1, and there are some people that are going to put Three Billboards number 8 or 9, and then there's some people that are going to put Three Billboards at number 1, and maybe Shape of Water gets number 3 or number 4, but I doubt there's a lot of ballots out there that put Shape of Water as low as 7, 8, or 9. It's just, even though it is a year of really great films and a lot of the, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of votes higher up on the ballot for films like Call Me By Your Name. A lot of ballot votes that are higher up for Get Out. A lot of ballot votes that are higher up for Lady Bird. So it just depends between Three Billboards and Shape of Water which one has the most number 2 votes, the most number 3 votes, the most number 4, and the least number of number 8, number 9, number 7 votes. And that's how they kind of tally stuff for Best Picture. I went into an example of this, I think, a few weeks ago in a different video. So I think it was one of the longer ones from a while back. I think it was the last predictions video before Globes had happened. Yeah, I think it was that one. Anyway, so yeah. So I think that the divisiveness does hurt Three Billboards. And I feel, I initially had said a few weeks ago, I said that Billboards at this point had about the same divisiveness that Birdman had. But now, after the New York Times article and after a few other things here and there, and missing director, I think it's more divisive than Birdman was. And Birdman, I think definitely that year there was only 8 nominees for Best Picture, but I think it had more. It had a number, not a significant number, obviously, but it had a number of number 8 votes or number 7 votes. But I think this year there's going to be more votes down in those lower numbers for Three Billboards than we saw for Birdman. And also, we mentioned no Best Picture nomination at Indie Spirits. We've seen like Spotlight was nominated there, Birdman was nominated that year. Obviously, Moonlight won that year. That was just last year. at Indie Spirits. We've seen not Argo, but 12 Years a Slave was nominated. I think it won too. Um, was the artist there? I can't remember if the artist was there. There's a few other ones. But more recently, yeah, we've seen that your Best Picture winner, if they're if they don't win Indie Spirits, they're most likely nominated. We have to go back to Argo. I think was the last one not to at least be nominated by the Indie Spirits to win Best Picture. All right. So also that is a con. I didn't write this one down, but that's a con also for Shape of Water, is it doesn't have a picture nom at the Indie Spirits. I'm making these notes so I can go back to them later. All right. So now we'll move over to Shape of Water. Now, obviously, one thing is the Critics' Choice win. That's on the major thing about that is critics this year really loved Lady Bird, really loved Get Out, really loved Call Me by Your Name. So any one of those three, I thought, had a if they weren't a front runner, they were certainly had their hat in the ring to win. 3 Billboards definitely had critical support, but we saw Shape of Water was the one that prevailed. And the PGA win, I think, is a significant one, too, because the Producers Guild uses the same preferential ballot that the Oscars do, and on the preferential ballot, it was Shape of Water that won. Then again, we make the argument, again, that it was La La Land last year, which won on the PGA ballot, on that preferential ballot, and still lost Best Picture. Also, the DGA. We've mentioned this before for the Directors Guild, very likely to go to Shape of Water for Guillermo del Toro. And I think, as we've seen here in the past few years, DGA has been right, at least in one case or another. It's in the case of Argo, it got Argo right because it ended up winning Best Picture and Affleck wasn't nominated. In the case of, say, Gravity, it won Director at the Oscars, and it also won at DGA. Birdman, that was actually correct for both Best Picture and Best Director for Iñárritu. The Revenant, same thing. Last year with La La Land, same thing. Damien Chazelle ended up winning at the Oscars. So even if the DGA and PGA don't line up, which it looks very likely in this case like they will, it's still going to get one of those two right in most likelihoods. You have to go back to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, the last time that DGA got either director or picture wrong. They went with Ang Lee that year, and he did not win at the Oscars, and it did not win Best Picture. So every film since then that's won Best Pictures, at least, if it hasn't won DGA, it got a PGA, its director won, or something significant in that matter. Also, and I mentioned this earlier, but there is an importance to Shape of Water, and I didn't necessarily see this on my first viewing, but especially to the kind of liberal firebrands in Hollywood, we're seeing, okay, obviously you've got Sally Hawkins as the lead, and she's mute. So, okay, that's, if you put it into perspective, okay, that's like the disabled and all that, so that's kind of a minority there. You've got Octavia Spencer, who's a black woman, that's a minority. Richard Jenkins plays a gay man in the film, another minority. And you've got Stuhlbarg, I couldn't think of his name for a minute, sorry. Michael Stuhlbarg plays a Russian spy in the movie. Sorry, mini spoiler there. It's not a big spoiler, but I think it's, I think there's a preview or something that kind of alludes to it. So, and as a foreigner, that, and it's especially at a time and today with what do they call it? DACA, whatever it's called. So I'm sorry, I'm not up to date 100% on politics, but the one that Trump might knock out, that might knock some foreigners out of us, or out of the country, I mean, sorry. That's another kind of minority there too. So it's like all these minorities fighting the system, in this case, fighting Michael Shannon's character, who does feel very totalitarian and very aggressive, and obviously he comes on to Sally Hawkins in one scene. Again, I think that's kind of a spoiler there. Sorry, but hey, it's been out for a few months, and it's starting to rise in box office. So I think more people are seeing it. And I get the feeling most of you who are watching this have seen most of these movies, if not all of them. So so it does feel relevant in that way, and it feels important. It feels like all these minorities kind of banding together and fighting the same problem and getting the solution there. The problem is, I didn't think of this right away. this was not obvious on screen. This was something I thought about afterwards, and it was, a couple days after I'd seen the film, I was like, oh, wait a minute, that's right. You've got, so I was like, no wonder it's really, and then I thought about it again after it had won PGA and stuff. I was thinking, that's true. That's true. It does have kind of these minorities in the movie being depicted by the actors, all coming together and, coming at the problem in different ways, all with kind of their own solutions and all playing a different part, and all of a sudden, boom, we get what we want. So in that way, it does feel important, but it's not on the nose. It's not obvious the same way that Three Billboards is. Also, I'm not throwing out the possibility completely that Shape of Water could end up winning Best Film at BAFTA. It is the most nominated film. We've seen La La Land was the winner last year there as the most nominated film. The Revenant won there as the most nominated film. What else? Well, Birdman was the most nominated, but it lost. I think did 12 Years a Slave, was that? Oh, God, I'm trying to think now. I thought I had all this memorized, but I don't. Well, 12 Years, American Hustle, and Gravity all had pretty close number of nominations at BAFTA. They were all three in contention there. So, yeah, we've seen in many years now, especially the past 2 years, that your leading nominee, as far as the number of nominations, wins Best Film at BAFTA. But, again, I think competition is kind of stiff over there. All right, so as we see, that's all the pros for Shape of Water. Now, the cons, I'm starting to number those. The number on those is starting to grow. Obviously, there's no SAG Ensemble nomination. So, I've kind of, broken record here if you've been watching every video, but you have to go back to Braveheart, the only Best Picture winner ever, actually, to win without a Screen Actors Guild Ensemble nomination. Coincidentally, of course, that was the same year that they started that prize. And that was a tricky year. You had Apollo 13 and was that Sense and Sensibility and a few other ones in the race that year that, it was kind of hard to dwindle that down to 5. And the same way this year it was really hard to dwindle it down to 5 too. And we had like Mudbound and The Big Sick in there as well at SAG, and they were not. It didn't end up on the Best Picture list. So it was, it's a tough year. A lot of great ensemble work this year. So it doesn't have as much obvious acting support. Now, obviously, like I said, Birdman had 3 acting nominations at the Oscars, and it won Best Picture without a single actor winning their individual prize. And it looks like that's the way it's going to land for Shape of Water as well. But Birdman won SAG Ensemble, though. So even though it didn't win any individual awards, really anywhere except the Globes for Michael Keaton, it still had that SAG Ensemble win. And, Shape of Water obviously wasn't even nominated. And this one, it wasn't obvious to me at first, but then I thought about it. And I'm like, my God, it's true. And it's kind of the thing that made me really say that Shape of Water, I think, is in more trouble than we're thinking. Look at what Shape of Water has done. It's won Critics' Choice. It's won PGA. It's, missed out at the SAGs for Ensemble. It is the most nominated film this year. It's done very well at all the guilds. It pretty much got into every last guild it possibly could. What other film has done that? La La Land. And what film did we all really, and again, I'm as guilty of this as anybody else is, what did we all overlook last year? We're like, oh, that doesn't matter. It was that SAG Ensemble snub for La La Land last year. We all overlooked it, and we all said, nope, it's going to be La La Land, and it turned out to be Moonlight. So, obviously, I think there's a lot more things that have to happen at the end. Remember, going back to La La Land last year, it did win BAFTA, and it did strong there, but it didn't sweep the same way it swept the Globes, the same way it pretty much swept Critics' Choice, including the tie for original screenplay there. And it, what else can I mention here? It did very well at the guilds, and right now, Shape of Water has already won the production design guild, which it was going to anyways. It did lose the Ace Eddie Award to Dunkirk, and I don't think it's going to win film editing at the Oscars, excuse me. But we saw that La La Land had won Ace Eddie as well. So, but it was going up to that final bit there that we saw, okay, so BAFTA didn't give as many wins to La La Land as everybody suspected. And also it lost WGA, which right now I don't think WGA goes to Shape of Water. I am putting Get Out, I think, ahead to win that one at WGA. But I'm not for certain on WGA either. It's either Get Out or Lady Bird, I think. But I mean, again, I'm not throwing out the possibility that Shape of Water doesn't, or it could win WGA. It could. I'm just not betting on it right now. So I think part of the reason though that La La Land fell apart at the Oscars was, well, number one, there was the whole woke Twitter thing over which film feels more important. Which in this case, obviously the woke Twitter is all pro Shape of Water, all pro La La or Lady Bird, excuse me, and all pro Get Out, and it's all anti Three Billboards. But also, we saw that there was that kind of expectations that were set for La La Land, where if you didn't see it, by the time it had won all those Golden Globes, I actually saw it the day before the Globes award ceremony where it won 7. So I was, in that kind of early, I guess you can say early train of people who had seen it. And your expectations are set very high when you hear, okay, it won 7 Golden Globes, more than any other film. It's nominated for 14 Oscars, tying Titanic and All About Eve. So expectations are very high. And in La La Land, even though it's a really great movie, it's maybe didn't meet those expectations the same way that they were met for those other films. That automatically makes you say, oh, well, okay. Now, Shape of Water is the most nominated film. It's up for 13, which is just one shy of that. And what did we say? Benjamin Button was the last one that had 13. So, just landing on 13. I'm not obviously La La Land had more, but to land on just 13, it was Benjamin Button. You know how many? And that also, but that was a complicated year. I mean, not complicated, but it was Slumdog won that year. So. And there was a lot more support behind Slumdog than there was behind Benjamin Button. And it did win a few Oscars, like I think for makeup and one of the sound categories or whatever it was. So it won a few awards. And I definitely think Shape of Water will win multiple awards. Like I said, I think it's production design, score, and director at least. It could take, I don't know if it can win the sound categories. I'm not thinking that. Cinematography, I don't think so. I don't think costumes. Really, the only other one it could take would be screenplay and picture. I think it could win a maximum of 5. So yeah, I think that's that's a possibility. But anyway, so yeah, like I'm trying to say here, it's a case where it's kind of falling into that same trajectory that La La Land is right now. Where it's getting all this guild love, all this love here and there, misses the SAG ensemble, and we've yet to see if those expectations are set really high, and if they're going to meet or fail from the latecomers to Shape of Water. Because there's still some people that haven't seen Shape of Water. There were people who hadn't seen La La Land until after the nominations were out. So we'll see if those expectations are met. But I know I've heard by proxy, one person talked to an actual voter at the Academy, and they saw Shape of Water late, and it was actually right before the nominations were announced. It was kind of the last film they saw before voting, I guess, and they said they liked it, they didn't love it. So, and that was after all these expectations had been set, with the exception of the actual nominations being announced. So, that's a sign that, okay, for at least one person out there is kind of lining up with that La La Land theory of, okay, there's a chance that these expectations are going to be set very high and that they could possibly not be met. All right, we already mentioned here, no love whatsoever from the Indie Spirits Awards for Shape of Water, which, Moonlight was a big player at Indie Spirits last year. Spotlight was a big player there. Birdman was. 12 Years a Slave was. Again, we have to go back to Argo the last time. Indie Spirits didn't matter in the Best Picture race. Again, to repeat it again, less likely to win screenplay. I think, I don't know, I have it ranked in second place right now, but I don't know, I think there's more arguments to be made, I think, for Get Out to win and for Lady Bird to win than there is for Shape of Water to win screenplay. And especially as we've seen in recent years, like last year especially, we saw Kenneth Lonergan, Damien Chazelle, and Barry Jenkins are the 3 big players in the Oscar race because they were all three up for director. Their films were up for screenplay and picture and acting awards and so on. And each one of them walked away with an Oscar last year. But that was not the case with Iñárritu when he was up against Wes Anderson and Richard Linklater, the year of Birdman, Boyhood, and Grand Budapest Hotel. So, yeah, so we've seen that if the Oscars want to spread the wealth, they will. If they don't want to, they don't have a problem sending Richard Linklater home with nothing, sending Wes Anderson home with nothing, even though their films do win a couple other prizes here and there. So, if the Academy's in that voting mind right now, okay, if they are, then they'll say, okay, well, we're gonna give director to Del Toro, so that's his big win. We don't need to give him screenplay, and he is a producer on the film for Best Picture. So maybe if they're feeling that way, they could say, okay, well, let's give a different prize to Best Picture. And then, if they say, okay, well, Jordan Peele is the writer, director, and a producer on Get Out. If we want to give him something, then, okay, we can give him screenplay. But then again, you can make the same argument for Greta Gerwig, except she's not a producer on I keep wanting to say La La Land, on Lady Bird. So if you give Lady Bird Best Picture, that doesn't help Greta Gerwig's case. Again, you can make that argument that, okay, if we give her screenplay, okay, that gives her something. And then you could also say, well, Martin McDonagh was snubbed for director, so we feel bad about that. Some do, some don't. But, if some voters do, if enough do, they'll say, well, let's give him screenplay, or let's give him picture for that. So, yeah, I mean, it's all up to what they're thinking the day and the weeks of Academy voting. If they want to spread the wealth, or if they're like, nope, we like this movie, we like it a lot, we're going to give it all three of those big prizes in screenplay, directing, and Best Picture. So, yeah. And the last two cons against Shape of Water are kind of more statistical things. But we've seen in the past 3 years, or is it 4? No, it's the last, the last 2, sorry. It's been weird. Okay, the last 2 years, director and picture have split. Then we had Birdman, and then the 2 years before that, director and picture had split, and then you have to go back to the artist, and then it hadn't split in a few years before that. But director and picture splits are so much more frequent in the past few years than they ever have been in Academy history. And in the last 5 years, we've only seen, in the past 5 years, only once has director and picture lined up. So in that case, that is against the argument of Shape of Water winning. And instead, statistics in the last at least 5 years are saying that director and picture are going to split. So in that case, you have to line up with either Get Out winning Best Picture and Shape of Water winning director, Lady Bird wins picture and Shape of Water wins director, or Three Billboards wins picture and Del Toro wins director for Shape of Water. So, or you do a vice versa anyway, except for obviously Billboards can't win director. So, yeah, statistics are saying that the splits are more common than ever have been in Academy history. So if they continue, which preferential ballot might be the reason why it's happening, it could obviously happen again. And also, as we've seen, arguably 3 years in a row now, the odds-on favorite on Oscar night to win Best Picture has lost. So a lot of these sites like Gold Derby, IndieWire, Variety, and Vanity Fair, all these ones that put the odds up or who get the consensus votes from all the people that are betting on the Oscars. We saw, obviously Birdman, there was kind of a split. There were some people that were still sticking to their guns with Boyhood, some people that were on Birdman. I think overall the odds did favor Birdman ever so slightly, but it was pretty, almost a 50-50 split there between those two. So that's the argument one. But The Revenant was the front runner that year after it had won DGA and after it had done very well at BAFTA, and it had taken over for Spotlight was the front runner before that, and you could also argue Big Short also was the front runner for a little bit. So that's that. So and then last year, of course, La La Land was the big, heavy favorite going into the Oscar ceremony, and it ended up losing Best Picture. So right now, the odds-on favorite is Shape of Water. So we'll see. Now, obviously, that could change if BAFTA goes big time for Three Billboards. and they go head over heels for it, then maybe this front runner switches again, and all of a sudden Three Billboards is back out front. And then if Shape of Water ends up winning Best Picture, that could become a pro for Shape of Water. Is the odds-on favorite all of a sudden has gone back to Three Billboards, and now it's going back to that statistic, and in this case it'd be the last 3 years, where it's actually more likely for Shape of Water to win all of a sudden. So yeah. Anyway, so there were three deciding factors that could really help shape what's going to happen at the Oscar race, especially for Best Picture. Number one is if Shape of Water wins WGA. Again, I'm not betting on it at this point, but again, it would follow the example of if Get Out and Lady Bird are so butting heads over votes, and people trying to decide which one to go for, and it ends up siphoning off enough votes from each film that another film could win. If that continues to happen as it has for part of the season, with the exception of Critics' Choice for the Screenplay Prize there, I think that's what happened at SAG for those who like those two movies, and I think Three Billboards was there to overcome that. I think that happened at PGA, and Shape of Water reaped the benefits of that. So if that happens again at WGA, I think Shape of Water is probably the most likely to win, because the other two are I, Tonya and The Big Sick. And of those two, neither are nominated for Best Picture. I, Tonya was not even nominated for Screenplay at the Oscars. So that gives the edge to Shape of Water, I think, in that case. So if Shape of Water, if Get Out and Lady Bird continue to butt heads over there, and Shape of Water wins WGA, that could be, all of a sudden, I might shift and I might be, okay, Shape of Water wins Picture, but again, I'm going against that SAG vote, and that has hurt me before. Anyways, and then again, I mentioned earlier, if BAFTA goes head over heels for Three Billboards and it wins Actress, it wins Picture, it wins Supporting Actor, it wins Screenplay, it wins maybe Editing or Best British Film over there. If it takes 4, 5, or 6 BAFTA wins, and Shape of Water takes 2 or 3. Boom! That, to me, will definitely signify that Three Billboards has the more support than we were thinking. Then again, if a counter argument to that was Boyhood did very well at the BAFTAs that year, and Birdman only won for cinematography that year and nothing else, and that ended up winning Best Picture. And last year, Moonlight didn't win any BAFTAs, and it still won Best Picture. So there's a counter argument to that, but I think if Three Billboards it's got pretty stiff competition in most of the categories it's in, except for the 2 acting prizes I think it'll take. It's got pretty stiff competition for Best British Film, because you got Darkest Hour in there, and that one's up for Best Film too, so that's got a lot of merit to it. It could win Best Film, but again, you've got Shape of Water, you've got Dunkirk, I think could very easily win that, since it is it's most relevant, I think, over at the BAFTAs than any other awards race this year. Director could also fall for Del Toro, and Christopher Nolan could win director over there. It's a possibility. More so than DGA, for sure. So, but if Three Billboards does very well over there in these stiff categories, and against all this competition, that is a sign for me that it's still in there to play. And then if anything but Shape of Water wins DGA over the weekend, like all of a sudden if Lady Bird wins DGA all of a sudden, or if Get Out wins DGA, or if Three Billboards wins DGA, that could convince me of something else. And then Christopher Nolan's the final nominee. He could win DGA. I mean, it's not the most outlandish theory, but I mean, it's just so far ahead, I think, right now for Del Toro. But you never know until the final envelope is open. So anyway, so if anything but Shape of Water wins DGA, that's a bad sign for Shape of Water going forward, because then all of a sudden, okay, if it can lose DGA, which right now is probably the most solidified, easy bet of any of the awards races going forward for the top prize, it's DGA going with Shape of Water. If it can't win that, then we definitely know that something weird is going to happen in Best Picture, and maybe all of a sudden that solidifies Three Billboards more. Maybe all of a sudden Del Toro's not a lock for director at the Oscars, and somebody else can win. Other than if McDonough wins over there, then okay, then we've got a hell of a situation, because then that means Billboards wins Picture, but then we don't know what's going to happen at the Oscars for director since he's not nominated. Maybe they just go with Del Toro anyways, but it means Del Toro is vulnerable. And anyway, so yeah, And then also I should mention too, if BAFTA for whatever reason does not go, if they go with anybody but Nolan or Del Toro, that could be another big sign. But I think that, again, I think it's between those two at BAFTA. And I think those two at BAFTA for director is the tightest race that we're going to see in any of the future director races. I think DGA is way more heavily favored for Del Toro than it is for Nolan. Again, I do think Nolan has a shot, but it's not a very good shot. Not one I would bet on. So, yeah, so I think it's much closer competition at BAFTA than anywhere else. So, that's really all I have to say about the Best Picture race. I mean, it's really going to continue to change and mold here as we keep going through the rest of the race. And really, the only other categories I didn't mention here again were screenplay. And I am betting on 3 Billboards to win screenplay. Again, I'm going on that bet of Get Out and Lady Bird butting at each other's heads and siphoning off each other's votes. And I think some people that are caught in the middle there who think, oh, well, 3 Billboards is the best screenplay of the year, which for me it is. I think it's the talkiest screenplay of the year that helped with Spotlight, that helped with The Big Short that year, that helped with Manchester by the Sea, I think, last year in the original screenplay race. Sometimes it's the talkier, more vibrant screenplays that win this category. You can go back to Pulp Fiction, Django Unchained, stuff like that. That definitely helps. So I think that helps 3 Billboards. And as I've said, the last 5 years, Best Picture takes screenplay. So again, that's another reason why I'm lining up with 3 Billboards. But if we're going to see that rule get broken this year, I think Get Out is the one to do it if it's not Shape of Water that wins picture either. Because, Jordan Peele is, he's a big breakout star now as far as being behind the camera as well as in front of the camera, and also being a writer there on a feature film and not just doing the shorts and the stand-up stuff and the what I'm looking for a word here, the skits and stuff that he did on Key and Peele. That's what I'm trying to say. So, and he did win, like I said, Critics' Choice. I think he'll. Right now, I'm betting on him to win WGA, but that one's going to be close. So if he wins WGA, if for whatever reason he wins the BAFTA for original screenplay, I'll change over to him at the Oscars here. But if there's going to be a year where that record is broken, I think Get Out is probably the one that's more likely to do it. I think the nomination for Lady Bird is a good sign that it was liked there. But in particular, for me, just reflecting on the movie, Lady Bird of these 3 movies is the one that stood out the least in my memory, at least. It's the only one of these 3, and actually of these 5, with The Big Sick, because that's also on my top 10 list of the year. The rest of them are on there, except Lady Bird, I think, is number 13 or 14 at this rate. So for me personally, but so that one didn't stick in my memory too well. And also, I just don't think. Yeah, and obviously some people disagree with this, but I just don't think it's all that big an accomplishment when it comes to the screenplay itself. I mean, I mentioned it in my last video there, I was kind of upset, but it's, hey, I'm just saying it's true. Edge of 17 last year was written by a female and directed by a female, was a coming-of-age story, was set in high school, the same thing as Lady Bird, and nobody gave a shit about that movie last year when it came to all these award stuff, and nobody gave a shit about it as far as advancing the female empowerment stuff. Now, obviously, this year there's totally different circumstances around the politics of it, and it's a definitely more hot button issue this year than it was last year. But it just doesn't, in my eyes, it doesn't seem fair because I think Edge of 17 is also a vastly superior film to Lady Bird in almost every capacity. I mean, the acting I thought was better in Edge of 17 than it was in Lady Bird. I think the writing was way better. I think arguably the direction, that one I might give you the edge to Lady Bird on that, because I think there were some very well directed scenes in Lady Bird that still do stick out in my mind. But I think in almost every other capacity, even down to the editing and the music choices and the style of the editing and the way it was shot and everything, I would give the edge to Edge of 17. So yeah, for me personally, there is a little bit of a personal bias there in that. But and again, I'm just not really seeing the technical love and the big accomplishment there in the screenplay, at least part of Lady Bird. It didn't win the Globe, even though it was the favorite to win there. It didn't win Critics' Choice, even though it was in close competition there. And it didn't. I don't think it's going to win WGA. I don't think it's going to win at BAFTA either. So it probably. I don't. It's right now. I'm seeing a few odds are favoring Lady Bird to win original screenplay right now. Why? on what basis? On what grounds? It's just no. I'm just not getting that one. And again, personal opinion does. I try not to let it factor in way too much when I'm trying to predict these things. I try to go more on stats and who's won what and who's more nominated and all that stuff. So even if Three Billboards to me, if I fell on the divisive side of it and I said I don't like it, it's not my favorite, and it is my favorite, by the way. But even if I didn't, I would probably still be predicting Three Billboards. I can say that. I would probably be more happy in my heart to vote for Shape of Water, because I would probably still prefer that one if I was on the divisive end of Three Billboards. But I would probably still be voting Three Billboards because of that SAG rule last year. And that being said, though, I mean, all four of these movies are great movies. I mean, that's, for me, I think all four of them are better than Moonlight last year, and that's nothing against Moonlight. It's just, I don't know, that one, again, it's, as I said last year, it's not my go-to movie, and personally for me, I think Call Me By Your Name is a better movie in that category of the gay romance and the gay coming-of-age story than Moonlight was. But again, that's just my personal tastes. And like I said, Lady Bird, it's not in my top 10 this year, but it's on the bubble there. It's on the outside looking in. Get Out, I think, is a phenomenal film and a big stance on where race is today in America and how racism is still there, even if it is not as outright and as anguished and as hurtful as it was in the past 50 years in American history, but it's still there. Shape of Water, I think, is a very significant film. It's a beautiful movie too, just to look at, let alone to watch the whole story play out. But so I'm not gonna personally, not to say I was hurt by the fact that Moonlight won last year. I do think it's a good enough film that I can say, oh, it's a great addition to the canon of Oscar-winning Best Picture films. I think that's true for Moonlight. I think that's true for all four of these movies, because I do get the politics part of why Lady Bird would be a significant win, why Get Out would be a significant win, why Three Billboards would be a significant win, why Shape of Water would be a significant win. Whether it's just down to the director, him or herself, the fact that Shape of Water is also a vote for a Latin director, in the way that Lady Bird is a vote for a female director, in the way that Get Out is a vote for a African American director, in the way that Three Billboards is a vote for a British, or in that case Irish director. So yeah, I mean. I'm not, and again, I'm not saying I was hurt by the fact that Moonlight won last year, but I thought there were more alternatives last year to who could win Best Picture, who I felt was a more deserving winner, and I felt was one that I personally would appreciate more. But all four of these, I don't have a problem with them winning. So I don't want to get that out, out there at this point. So any other categories? Like I said, film editing, I think there is a little bit of suspense there, but I think Dunkirk will edge out all the other ones. But I would not be surprised, even though Shape of Water did not win Ace Eddie, I wouldn't fall out of my chair in shock if that one wins editing, and in that case, it would probably be the favorite to win Best Picture. Let's see, the rest of these, like I said, the sound categories, they'll probably line up with Dunkirk, but I don't really see enough solidification behind Blade Runner or behind Baby Driver or behind Star Wars or Shape of Water to win those. Visual effects, I think will line up with War for the Planet of the Apes. So the only other one really that, as I bump part of my desk here, that leaves a little bit of mystery as far as what's going to win is foreign language film. And like I said, I think it's down to Loveless, The Square, and Fantastic Woman for this prize. The Square, I've heard, and I haven't seen any of these films yet, but The Square is, from what I've heard, a very divisive film. There's some people, again, like Three Billboards, who some love it, some hate it. Fantastic Woman is transgender. Everybody talks about that. So I don't know if it's the story itself is transgender, or if it's. I've also heard it's another film this year was from a transgender director, and it wasn't part of the subject matter, but it was a big vote of confidence for that. So that might be the case, but that's either way. It's something to do with transgender with Fantastic Woman. That's all I know, and I don't mean I'm not saying that in a derogatory or negative view. I'm just saying I haven't seen these movies, and I'm only hearing this from word of mouth. So that. And Loveless is from Russia, which Russia has not won foreign language film in a while. Leviathan came relatively close a few years ago, and it won the Globe that year. I think it was 2015, 2014, whatever year that was. So there is preference for some people to really like Russia's films, and then also it's one that I've heard a lot of support for, and I guess it's also very relevant, too, because I think there's some sexual angle there too, which is could really impact it there. And as we saw last year, foreign film, the entire vote I think was decided by the fact that Asghar Farhadi, or however you pronounce his name, was not invited to the Oscars last year. And I think that's what almost 100% won that film, foreign language film. So sometimes the politics of it are, the deciding factor in this category. But yeah, so I think it's down to those three. Fantastic Woman I've put out front. It was nominated at the Globes, nominated at Critics' Choice, which I believe the other two were as well. In the Fade kept winning all the other prizes, but now that one's not nominated here, that leaves, again, a mystery here as far as what's going to win. But I'll go with Fantastic Woman for now because it's kind of everybody else's pick, and yeah. All right, well, yeah, sorry, I have my camera on here, but I don't have it, like, looking at it the whole time. I'm looking at all my statistics, and I'm looking at all my predictions. I'm looking at all the stats here, so, yeah, I hope this kind of glare thing isn't too distracting, but anyway, so it is sunset here, so it's a little better than having the lights go on and off the whole time, right? I hope so. Anyway, so sorry, this went on a lot longer than I thought it would, but hey, this is a big, huge race going on here for Best Picture, and I think it's closer than most people are saying. A lot of people are just saying Shape of Water, Shape of Water, Shape of Water, and again, kind of like La La Land last year, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody else is. But we all were just kind of not, just checking that one off, saying it's done, it's done, it's done, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, and we all ignored the SAG rule. We all ignored all these other things that are playing against Shape of Water. Not all of them are playing directly into Three Billboards, but we didn't think all those things were necessarily playing into Moonlight. We were, some of us thought Manchester by the Sea, some of us thought Hidden Figures last year. If it wasn't going to be those, it was, if it wasn't going to be Moonlight, it was going to be either Manchester or Hidden Figures. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a crazy race this year, and there's all sorts of tea leaves and little historical preferences. Each one of them are kind of going their different direction and saying a different thing for different reasons. So it's going to be a weird year the rest of the year, and trying to predict these is going to be difficult. But we'll see what BAFTA does. If BAFTA is really helpful, and if if a big surprise happens at DGA, that's just going to make us more confused. If BAFTA goes big time for Shape of Water, or goes big time for Three Billboards, or for anything else for that matter, then yeah, we'll see how that plays out. So yeah. All right, I think I'm done for now. I'll probably, I think I'm done for a while now. I'm going to let things sit as they are, let the rest of the controversies unfold, let the rest of the sexual harassment stuff come out. I'm sure there'll be more stuff, but yeah, let all this figure out. We'll see what else settles here, and I'll let the dust settle a little. I can't even talk anymore. This is what happens when I talk for over an hour. I'll let the dust settle a little bit more before we come back. We'll see what happens. I think DGA is this Saturday night. So if something big, significant happens there, I'll come back probably Sunday morning. I don't know if I'll be up the whole time. I might just check Sunday morning to see what won. So, yeah. So we'll check in after the weekend if something big happens at DGA. If it goes to plan, I'll probably just wait until later. So, yeah, I don't have any big other videos coming up, really. I mean, I've got 77 subscribers now, which, like I think I mentioned that the other day. Hey, I'm glad everybody's here watching the channel. Tell you what, guys, all you new subscribers here, if there's anything that you really like that you think I should talk about or should make videos about, go ahead and let me know. I'm not, 100% on YouTube all the time. I've got other stuff going on in my life. I'm not depending. This is more of a hobby than anything else. So if there's something that you think I should talk about or do, or if you go back, I had the Plagman Rules podcast going for a long time. If you think I should bring that back, let me know. And yeah, I want to hear from you guys. If there's any other content or any other type of thing that you want me to do or want me to try, I'm down for it. So yeah. Okay, I'm going to close out there. We'll see you guys next time, whenever next time is.